Living Corporate is brought to you by Pfizer. Every day, Pfizer colleagues work across developed and emerging markets to advance wellness, prevention, treatments, and cures that challenge the most feared diseases of our time. For more than 170 years, Pfizer has worked to make a difference for all of those who rely on them. Learn more at Pfizer.com. What's up, y'all? It's Zach with Living Corporate, and I'm coming to you after the brutal beating and murder of Tyree Nichols by black police officers. Look, there's a lot to be said, and that will continue to be said and shared from this microphone and Living Corporate's network as we continue to mourn yet another black body viciously brutalized by the state. But for the sake of where we are in this moment, I'm gonna simply say that you don't have to be a part. You don't have to be a white person to support and uphold white supremacy, and that oftentimes members of marginalized identities participate in patriarchal, racist, ableist systems, homophobic systems, in order to advance themselves in front of in whiteness, right? To participate in white supremacy, to participate in homophobia, patriarchy, and other exploitative social constructs is an act of selfishness, of course, evil, and selfishness being tied to survival and or advancement. What I would challenge organizations to do before you make a statement decrying the murder of Tyree Nichols, that you would ask yourself, what are you doing in your workplace to advocate for a less brutal experience for your black employees? What policies do you have in place? What procedures, what processes are you implementing and following and holding yourselves accountable to, so that black folks are not mistreated every day? Did you do any type of analysis before you decided to cut 10% of your company? Or did you cut your 10, 11, 7, 5%, whatever, and then it just so happened to be that half of the folks impacted were black and brown? If you're a manager and you happen to be black, do you advocate for other people that look like you, or do you stray away from that because you don't want to be seen as the black representative? Because that's a common thing that happens a lot in corporate America, if you didn't know. And of course, if you're white, like, what power and voice and privilege are you leveraging to advocate for people that look like you and that don't look like you? There's so much to be said about this moment and this season. But I come to y'all exhausted and tired once again, because these systems continue to flex against change. And anytime there seems to be an inroad, the same white folks, the same people in power, continue to resist. And there also doesn't really seem to be any type of true desire to shift or redefine or redesign or reimagine any real system. It almost seems as if we're just speeding up and getting worse. And so that is discouraging. It's disheartening. But we're here and we press forward. And with that in mind, I want to thank Tracy Wilson who is a health equity advocate and leader at Pfizer. I want to thank her for her time today. We talk about a wide array of things related to her journey, her career, ways that Black women need better support and advocacy for their well-being. I'm excited for you to hear this conversation, and I appreciate our campaign and partnership with Pfizer so that you can continue to hear these types of dialogues and discussions. With that being said, we're going to have a little break, and the next conversation you're going to hear will be between myself and Tracy. See you soon. The Antigen podcast returns with a 3-part miniseries spotlighting maternal immunization. When it comes to vaccine development, there's been a shifting paradigm. Help protect pregnant women and their infants through research rather than from research. Join us this season to dive deeper into this topic, the history, challenges, innovations, and exciting developments to come. Subscribe and listen to The Antigen, powered by Pfizer, on your favorite podcast app. Dr. Wilson.
Yes.
Welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
You know what I'm doing? You know, we got the murder of Tyre Nichols and health equity being what it is. And then also I got 2 kids.
Yeah. All of that.
We tired.
All of that. Yes.
But you know what though? I think like other Black and brown folks around in America and around the world, we persist on, right? That's where I'm at. I want to get right to it because I feel like I can already tell, even off mic, I was like, oh, we're going to have a nice conversation. Now, we booked an hour. We might mess around and use this whole hour. I ain't going to hold you. Let's talk about your journey, okay? Why nursing and why Pfizer?
Why not Pfizer? Why not nursing, right? I think that's probably more of the question. So for me, healthcare was always a part of my DNA. As I probably have told plenty of people that have asked me that question before, I always wanted to be in healthcare. Always. And it started at a very young age. I wanted to be a pediatrician. And anybody that asked me when I was little, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a pediatrician. I wanted to take care of babies specifically. So the littlest of little people. But my earliest memory of healthcare, my mom had a hysterectomy when I think I was either 6 or 7 years old. And so she asked me because she couldn't take care of her womb. And so she needed me to take care of her incision, which was, that lower bikini area. And so she needed someone to clean it for her. And so she asked me, because she knew I wanted to be, a doctor. So she asked me at 6, 7 years old if I could clean her womb. And so I did. Now, almost fainted doing it. I could literally I have the memory even to this day of saying, Mama, what does it mean when your ears start ringing and your eyes get fuzzy like a TV? And she's like, baby, go lay down, put your legs up in the air because you're getting ready to faint. And still to this day, my Achilles heel, as far as taking care of anything dealing with wounds, it still will make me drop to my knees. I can see blood pumping out of anywhere. I can stick people. I can do IVs blind, with my eyes covered. But you give me anything a big gaping wound or taking out stitches, I'll turn green and it will hit the deck. So that's my earliest memory as far as healthcare and wanting to take care of people. And then Pfizer, I've been with Pfizer about 3 years. And 3 years ago, I remember seeing a job posted talking about hospital business unit. And I'm like, that's an interesting hospital. I'm like, look, I think I could do something like that if it's part of a hospital. I mean, I've been in hospital, for my entire life. So to do something that dealt with hospital, and one particular unique thing about a part of that particular role was that you were going to be doing things dealing with helping healthcare providers dealing with pathway development. So like implementations, if they had issues with, with their any kind of care, to help them think of new strategies of doing things. And I was currently doing that with the role that I was at. I was at Thermo Fisher Scientific. And so I was doing asthma pathway development. So looking at the end-to-end treatment for asthma. So the patient experience so with asthma patients, when a patient will come in to the patient experience that they were leaving, doing asthma pathway development. So I was like, this is right up my alley. So that's how I ended up applying for the role and with the hospital business unit here at Pfizer.
We talked. You talked a little bit about where your journey started and your passion came from. In caring for your mother, and so much of your profile though also involves health equity advocacy. So may I ask, what did it look like, if at all, for you to advocate for your mother to be cared for, even in that season or perhaps later in life?
I think for me, advocacy has always been a part of me. I mean, even as a kid, I was always advocating for other people. If I seen someone, getting in trouble, if I seen someone being bullied, I mean, I was always standing up for others, even more so than myself. There was a coworker that I had, part of my team. She retired now. She was another fellow nurse. And we called, it was a running joke between the two of us that we would always Red Cross. We love the Red Cross for people, and, maybe not always doing the same kind of self-care, but we would do it for others. So just Red Crossing for others. And so it's just naturally just a part of me. Never have an issue jumping into the fire or to the crossing lines, or the crosshairs for others, and fighting on behalf of the needs of other people.
It's tough, right? Because when I think about my wife, we have two small children. Mm-hmm. One of them is turning 3 in March. And the other one is like 3 months. And for each of my wife's pregnancies, there was some dramatic thing that happened, right? And I shudder to think what would have happened if I wasn't there. So let me tell you about the first thing. Okay. So again, this was almost 3 years ago. It's like right when COVID was like getting started, but it wasn't in crazy full swing yet. In fact, cause we're in Houston. So the day after.
Me too.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. Yeah. My bad. Yeah, that's right. But for the audience though, y'all, we're in Houston. Don't be getting weird now. I didn't give you my address. So stay where you at. But I am in Houston. All right. So me and Dr. Wilson in Houston. What's up? Try to pull up. Do something. Okay. Back to the story. We're in Houston. And this was like right before they started restricting the husbands from going up there with the wives during the postpartum or prepartum at this point. Anywho, we get there. And, my wife, we got there and we didn't realize that later we found out my wife was like 8 centimeters or something like that when she showed up at the hospital. And so she's struggling to walk and we're trying to like, hey, get some help. Right. And I don't really, for obvious reasons, I'm 6'2", 290 plus. I'm not really out here trying to be extra loud or aggressive when I'm outside because I'm not trying to create that kind of attention. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But I actually had to get loud and I said, hey, my wife is clearly pregnant. Help. And like everybody stopped and like some nurses came over and and Emery was born like, I want to say maybe like an hour later.
Wow.
Cause they were so shocked at how far along she was dilated.
Wow.
And so that was the first thing. So that was like dramatic, but it was fast.
Mm-hmm.
And so then 3 months ago, when our second daughter, Aman, was born, Candace said, hey, my wife's name Candace, she said, we're not going to do this again where we show up last minute and we're, it's that. Like, we're not going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to show up early. We're going to induce and and we already talked to the doctor and everything. Like, we had a plan. We show up. We're like, hey, we like to induce. We want to take we want to make sure there's no surprises. We're here. We're going to get our room. We're going to do what we need to do. And we're in there waiting. And we ask for the epidural. We're asked like kind of going, and then we said, okay, well, where are you at? Oh, you're at 6. You're at 6. And for some reason we were at 6 supposedly for like 3 hours. And I was like, I'm not no doctor, but that's not in line with like what happened the first time. Like, things progressed a lot faster and y'all supposedly tried to induce, like, so I don't understand. Like, we were just really confused as to like, and so out of nowhere, Candace started screaming like really, really loud, like really, really loud. Like, cause she did not scream like this at all the first time. Yeah. To the point, and I'm over here like, hey, and so now the nurses are right outside. I want to be clear. The nurses are right outside. I'm not going to say the hospital just not to blow the spot up, but I might. Y'all keep making me mad. And so they're right outside. And there's this big red button, Dr. Wilson, in the room. And I'm just like, man, I'm going to just press this. Like, so I press the button. Now all the nurses come in. Everybody come in. Everybody come in. And we're like, hey, first of all, my wife is clearly in pain. Also, we've been asked for the epidural, whatever. Where they gonna look down. Oh, you're 9 centimeters. You got to push right now. Yes. So now it goes from them ignoring us to, and I am not a doctor, but it felt almost like she was being berated and bullied for not pushing harder. And like, we're going to have this baby right now. Now, meanwhile, my wife is in tears and she's crying because she's like, she's crying, and in between her tears, she's saying, I did everything right. I came early. I asked. You're supposed to have a schedule, da, da, da. Now, mind you, the person out there who was supposed to be doing, he finally shows up because they're like, we're sorry, he's behind. Like, he was behind. Like, that's why he's not here yet to give the shot or whatever. So he finally shows up. By the time he shows up, it's too late. And so then like 5 minutes later, Aman is born. And praise God, like, she came out healthy and she was fine, and Candace was fine, not a lot of tearing or nothing like that. It worked out, but it's just like, but it's so dramatic. Mm-hmm. And it was so scary when I think about, and I have other people, friends, again, these are black men telling me stories about their partners, their spouses. They have a baby and then suddenly they're walking around and think, oh, am I passing another child? Only to find out it was a placenta that they didn't help the mother have or whatever. And so, for me, it's so personal. Of course, I came from a woman, and from a black woman at that. So of course it's personal, period. But it's viscerally personal to me, this topic around health equity and care and accessibility particularly for black women, because I've been front row seat to 2 situations where I really don't know what would have happened if I wasn't there to lend my voice. It's just really scary. And so I share all that to say, I'm curious, like, what does advocacy look like and show up like in your day-to-day job?
I live and breathe it and do it every single day. It's entrenched into my daily. Because of me being a black woman, because of my lived experiences, I bring it with me to my daily duties every single day. So I find opportunities in how I can improve the lives of others and increase access to patients' lives every single day with, whether the conversations that I'm having with healthcare providers. So my particular role, so I'm a field medical director here at Pfizer. So what my particular role is that I have conversations with healthcare providers, academic centers, patient organizations on our particular products. And so the team that I'm on is the antiviral team. One of the things is wanting to ensure that, do our healthcare providers understand the utilization of it? Do they know where access is? And then do they really understand, those patients that are at high risk to progression to severe COVID? And so we have a huge campaign going on right now talking about no plan go. So do they know about, those patients that are at high risk? And then for those patients, that are at high risk, educating them around the plan. Have they developed a plan? Do they know how to test? Do they know then to come in, to their, HCP or the healthcare provider, to show them the actual test, do a virtual visit, however it needs to go. And then they, then doing, are knowing then about the proper treatments that then are available. So that is my role, is the educational person around that particular product. So that is health equity is my lens that I'm bringing to my role every single day, is around access and around education, because the very lives of the patients that I'm dealing with needs it. And the healthcare providers that I'm working with, they're working with their patients to ensure that the patients need it as well.
We're talking about Black women. I'm double clicking on Black women in terms of the inequitable care that they receive in healthcare. But the reality is Black women face inequity everywhere, including the workplace, in all workplaces. But then for sure, in like healthcare and academic spaces, it's almost like doubly awful, And so I'm curious about the ways, you talk about being at Pfizer for 3 years. What are some ways that Pfizer has helped set you up to succeed? Because, and I ask this question because so often, you see like when a Black person comes in to take some type of role or leadership, it's when stuff is really bad. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, you gonna work. You gonna have a little title, but we here to, because we're at dire straits when we get a Black person in leadership for something. So, talk to me a little bit about what your experience has been like at Pfizer, because 3 years, that's a long time to be somewhere that you don't want to be. So I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, for me, this has been probably the most exciting and rewarding work that I have been able to do. And since I've been here, I guess when I came here, to meet people that have been at a place that, I've been here, 10 years, I've been here 15 years, I've been here 26 years. We're talking about tenured senior people. So to meet people that want to be at a place for that long, that kind of tells me that, exactly what you just said. You want to be at a place where people are enjoying what they're doing and want to stay. And so for me, this has been, where they've been able to put me in rooms and in places that I've never imagined that I would ever think or dream that I would ever be.
Give me an example.
So, for example, I had an opportunity to sit on a health equity panel with the National Organization of Black Elected Legislative Women just this past October. And when I'm talking about the Black elected legislative women, I'm talking about all of the Congresswomen, the Black elected Congresswomen in the U.S. Congress currently. And to sit on the health equity panel with some of your, one of the panelists was from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Another one was a leader from, one of the top, pharmaceutical company. And then we have me, and I'm like, it's me on this panel. But
Yeah.
speaking to, Karen Camber, who is one of the legislators that, helped to, the Crown Act. That we know is, the legislation, that was helping to move forward to protect Black women's hair, across the nation. Now we know that it did not go through the Senate just recently, but that legislation was, foundational to help, get passed through a lot of, legislative houses, as far as to help protect our hair and not to be discriminated against. She was one of the architects to help the young woman that actually came up with that whole idea. She was the architect in Congress to help push that through and that bill. So yes, so to be in that room with all of those powerful women was, again, I've never been a part of anything like that in my life. So to interact with, such powerful, women that have really just kind of taken me under their wing and to allow me to lend my voice to things. Ellen, Gersten, I wouldn't have the opportunity to be doing this without her seeing something in me and allowing me to lend my voice.
Well, I mean, I'm honored that you're here, and I'm excited to have this conversation. And definitely shout out to Ellen and to Erica and the team, for this dope campaign. I do want to, I want to talk about the fact that your star continues to rise. You've been a star for a long time. Like, you were a star before you knew you was, all of that. We know all that. But as you continue to grow awareness of your climb, what does it look like for you to lift as you climb, right? Like, so often, I'm gonna just say it. It's live corporate. We'll have a conversation. So often, I run into people. And when we had Yolande on the show, some months ago, last year actually, we talked about. She shared a story about how she remembered when she was younger and she saw a Black woman who she really liked and she really wanted to emulate, and she talked to her and kind of got the Heisman a little bit, right? Like, you back up. And that's a sad but not uncommon experience. And like, I have several of those experiences, and I always told myself, if I'm ever blessed enough to get to a place where someone else aspires to be, I'm not gonna be that. And so I'm curious. I'm sure. Again, we talked about off mic. Your whole brand is fire. You can't forget you. You know what I mean? Clearly, I know that you make a mark when you meet people, and I'm confident there are other Black folks, particularly younger Black women, newer to the profession, or maybe even aspiring to be a nurse, perhaps, or aspiring to just, they're engaging you. What does it look like for you to engage them back and to help them where you can?
For me, networking. For me, that is number one and key. I jokingly kind of say I am masterful at networking. So networking is key. I do that here at work, and knowing who to network with, how to network, sending out. It is nothing is wrong with reaching out, sending that email. Hey, do you have, brief time, a moment to reach out to, and sit down and talk with me 10, 15 minutes, to have a conversation with me. Just want to, know how you did whatever it was that you did. So networking is huge to me. On LinkedIn, LinkedIn that's my social media. I can almost care less about, any other social media. But LinkedIn is huge. And I get a lot of people that reach out to me on LinkedIn that ask, how did you do the steps and the pivots and the changes that you've done in your career? Besides being, a nurse started out in NICU, but I taught in academia, taught in community college, and I taught at the university level, teaching pre-licensure nursing students, so an assistant professor. And then, then also being in industry. So how did you do all of those changes and then get over into industry? So being an industry nurse practitioner and working for pharmaceutical companies. So, doing, networking through that. So I would say networking. Other things, as far as, within, Pfizer, trying to, maneuver through, the corporate kind of ladder is that avail yourself to new opportunities. So if, someone want to tap you for something, or even if you're not getting tapped, tap yourself into that opportunity, volunteer, for opportunities, let them know what you're interested in, talk to your manager, make sure they know that you're, you're willing and able and want to be, ready for, some kind of project or initiative. And then seek new skills. I'm always, the chronic student learner, wanting to do something, learn something new. So currently I'm in school right now getting another master's, and I'll be finished in May. So I'm at Tulane University School of Medicine pursuing.
Come on, Tulane.
Absolutely. Who won the Cotton Bowl?
Yes. Yes.
So I'm getting that second master. Well, it's not second master's. I don't know what master's it is. I got a few degrees. But anyway, it's in bioethics and medical humanities. And so, so I'm excited about, this is the first degree out of everything I've ever done, the first degree that I feel like is actually mine. I'm not checking a box. I'm not, doing this because I feel like it's something I need to be doing. No, this is mine, and I'm gaining something from it. This is learning just for me. So yes, I'll be finishing May with that. And so mentoring and sponsorship, I love mentoring. That's probably something that comes just naturally to me. So I just love it.
The story, again, we started off talking about the murder of Tyre Nichols, but the story of April Valentine is still very fresh for those who don't know. On January 10th, April Valentine died in childbirth at Centinela Hospital due to medical neglect. She and her boyfriend complained for hours to the nurses that she could not feel her legs, and they told her that they could not call the doctors because they could get upset. I think that I was going to say this about, I do have a question about this and that I want to pose to you. But the other thing I think about when it comes to healthcare inequity is it's not like fixing a car, or like the knowledge itself is so specialized. So you can't, so like when my wife was going through that experience in real time, or when the nurses weren't getting to my wife enough on the first pregnancy delivery, I can't be like, move out the way, I'm gonna do it myself. Like I don't know. And so there's such a overwhelming feeling of helplessness that is there, right? Because you just can't do anything, or so you feel, in terms of you can't do it yourself, right? Like if someone comes to my home and I feel like they got my fence wrong, I know how to fix a fence. I can do that. You know what I'm saying? Can't deliver no child. I don't know how to do that. I'm not no doula. So my question, a little bit of levity there, but really going back to the story of April Valentine, and then just a broader experience of and the mortality rate of Black women in this country. What is your response when you see stories like this for Black women seeking care? When you as you think about the two populations, so you have the Black women seeking care and help, and then you also have, your position towards the people that should be providing said care. Like, what goes to your mind when you see these types of stories?
These stories are not uncommon. I mean, it's going on. It's been going on. I mean, we can go back to, slavery and the, and our bodies, being used and experimented on. I mean, this has been a long-standing issues in our voices not being respected and our bodies not being respected. And that, our our bodies being looked at as experiments in that, we tolerate pain at a higher level, various issues. And so I'm a part of this story. I had my own issues as far as even being a healthcare provider myself, and my voice not even being respected by a healthcare provider. Now, when I always go to the doctor or to the emergency room, I don't always reveal what I call my superhero cloak. You know what I mean? I'm going to seek care just like anybody else. But back in, and I have, I shared the story on with She Media, talking about my experience back in 2015 going to the emergency room after having I had strep throat and flu at the same time, but then having neck pain, stiff neck at the same time, and going to one emergency room and telling them that my neck is hurting. I have flu, I have strep, but I just don't feel right. And this emergency room doctor was just dismissive of my concerns and my symptoms. And I told her, I was like, I have a stiff neck and I have a fever. I was like, could this be meningitis? And she's like, oh no, you're not sick enough. No, I see this all the time. No. And just dismissive. And I was like, are you sure? And she was like, no, I've been seeing this, all week, you don't have, all the symptoms. And I was like, I don't know about that. And so she's like, I'll do a neck x-ray, but no. And did the neck x-ray, which is not standard of care for checking for meningitis. But she did it and then sent me home despite my level of concern that I had for myself. And 2 days later, I was worse. And I did not go back to that emergency room. And I went to another emergency room, and that doctor, I gave them the same symptoms that I had. And that doctor actually did the standard of care, which is a spinal tap. And it came back that I had viral meningitis and got admitted for 4 days because they had to wait till all of the cultures came back to ensure that it wasn't bacterial, which would have killed me if it had been that. Well, it would have killed me probably within the 2 days that I was at home stewing. But luckily it wasn't bacterial. So yes, didn't honor nothing. So long story short, I got all the medical bills taken care of because I went back to the hospital and talked to all of the chain of command in that hospital to get that doctor reprimanded. But to going back to, that story, of April, I saw that I put remarks in there because this is classic medical gaslighting, to not have your symptoms honored by the healthcare provider at all. But this is no different than what happened with Serena Williams, and her dealing with her blood clots, her pulmonary embolism symptoms that she was having during her pregnancy. This is no different than the story of Dr. Susan Moore. If we can remember her, she was a doctor that died during COVID, and her complaints not being honored while she was in the hospital, and she FaceTime Facebook Live during her stints during the hospital stay, and died right before everything. So we have to honor patients' complaints, what they're stating to us. We have to advocate for ourselves. And what I have been just chiming in and making sure that everyone is alerted to this, the media campaign that I did for medical gaslighting, is make sure that you're advocating for yourself. Make sure that you're listening to your instincts. Your instincts are never going to tell you wrong. Make sure you're going to doctor's appointments with your questions already written down, ready. Make sure that you have somebody going to an appointment with you. Because a lot of times when you go in, you may hear, me kind of one thing, or you may be overwhelmed and may not hear everything. The second person there with you is going to capture the rest of the information. And then the last thing that I kind of always close with is that if you don't feel comfortable, if something doesn't feel right to you, you always can and are obligated to get a second opinion, because your very life at the end of the day is what matters.
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing. And I'm so glad that your voice was heard in that moment for yourself as you advocated for your own life. Mm-hmm. I think what's so sobering, though, Dr. Wilson, is, Serena Williams and others, they challenge this kind of selfish and capitalist notion that if you have money or if you have degrees, then you'll be heard more than these other black folks who don't have money and who don't have degrees. And it's like, Serena Williams is like a world-class athlete. So you talk about people who know their body. She is incentivized in all sorts of manners to know her body. And she has money. I'm going to be honest, in my ignorance, until a handful of years ago, I just thought that if you had a lot of money, that your care was just elite. I just thought you had the best care because you have money.
Can I give you a statistic for Black women?
Please.
And mortality? Please. That the more education that you have, that the higher the risk that you will die during childbirth. There is a statistic for Black women. It shocked me. This was right before I had my son. I have a 5-year-old son and an 11-year-old daughter. And I came across that statistic just before I think I got pregnant with him. And when I read that, how startling do you think that was?
That is shocking.
Yeah. That the more education, you would think that it would be the inverse. You would be the opposite. No. For Black women,
for Black women specifically,
the more education.
It's interesting. As kind of an aside, we'll break the third wall a little bit here. It's interesting. So when I talk to people about living corporate, Dr. Wilson, they're like, "So, do you ever think you're going to do anything around other groups?" And like, living corporate is about centering and amplifying Black and brown voices. But anytime I say Black, they're like, well, there's almost like this frustration of when will you expand to talk about other things? I'm like, well, first of all, do your research. We're a network. We have tons of shows. We talk about all types of things from various perspectives of historically marginalized identity, but almost like an annoyance that there's such a focus on Black experience and Black women experiences. But this is why. This is a perfect example as to why. So next time you're asking me why we doing this, we got this Pfizer campaign, why we keep talking about Black and brown, why are so many of the guests Black women? This is why. That is obscene. So you take the time, you learn, you get educated, you do all the things that they tell you you're supposed to do, you turn around, and that makes you more likely to die as you bringing in life into this world. Oh, how awful. It also begs the question for me, that you think about, and I ask this question all the time. I'm actually curious to get your perspective on this. My grandparents, both sets of my grandparents had mad kids. Okay. Mad kids, like 10, 14. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Both sets of my grandparents were sharecroppers in Mississippi. Mm-hmm. From what I've seen, from my wife recovering from the birth of these two children, I rack my brain trying to understand how Black folks back in the day and just Black and brown communities without quote unquote modern healthcare were able to have so many children and be okay. Like, have you seen any studies around that, or why? Like, and is my anecdotal? Again, I know what I'm saying is anecdotal, but Have you ever thought about that, or is there any stats or information around
That's
how
a
that even
really
happens?
interesting question, and I'm just, and again, I'm just going to be written off of off of my
Yeah,
own kind of, thinking in my mind. Um, a lot of back then, you had the use of midwives. You had the use of, name home deliveries. So there wasn't a lot of use of going to, hospitals and things like that. So you had, Meemaw
right.
delivering, and, not that anything was safer. Again, I'm ripping, this is just me kind of talking and thinking in my head. You had the local, that local midwife that was delivering all of those babies in the town. Um, and so there was some comfort level and protection within the community. If you think of that,
Right.
protection in the community versus then you're going to the hospital where then that potential then bias or biases may then begin to infiltrate.
And I think so because and the reason I asked, I was talking about my wife and that because I've been asking this now probably for about 3 years. So I was just thinking about like my grandmother had so many children, and like both sets of my grandparents had so many, and they had them in their house. You know what I mean? And so it's just like, how is that possible? Like, and so yeah, I think to your point around, it goes back to something you said earlier about having someone who can advocate and support you in these rooms, in these spaces, someone who's listening to your body. I think there's like this also like kind of scary thing around like my wife said the other day is like, having so if you're having your child at your home and your mother or the family or the communal midwife or whoever is up, they're not incentivized, so they got to get out here and have dinner at 5 or to get certain insurance pay or whatever the case is. Like those are not the things that are happening in their ecosystem. And so it's different, but look, Dr. Wilson, like I have to say thank you so much for being a guest on Living Corporate. It's been a phenomenal conversation. Before we let you go, any parting words or shout outs?
I mean, I think this conversation, when we start to have these conversations around with health equity, and especially now that we're talking about, maybe leaning in a little bit more with these conversations around medical gaslighting and things like that, that we're kind of coming down hard on healthcare providers and things like that, and you're doing this wrong. And for me, I'm a healthcare provider. So I'm never going to come down or try to say, me that we're trying to say that healthcare providers are, we're doing these things wrong. But I think that there's something that we need to start paying attention to, that there is especially for women of color, that there's something going wrong here. And we need to start paying attention because lives are in danger. And we need to start having these conversations around what is the data, what is the issue, so that these particular subset of patients can have a more improved patient care experience, so that they're not in danger any longer when they come into the healthcare system. So I think that's what one parting word that I would like to leave on, is that no one is trying to come down hard on healthcare providers, but I think it's a needed conversation that we need to start having.
Dr. Wilson, Dr. Tracy Wilson. We can't wait to have you back. Thank you again. We consider you a friend of the show. We'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
And we are back. Yo, I want to thank Tracy for the time. Phenomenal conversation. Appreciate her work as someone, as you've heard in the conversation, who has a wife and who has and been with her and held her hand through the delivery of 2 children. This work is certainly very personal and dear to me. I also hope that as we examine yet another instance of the state brutalizing a black body, that we would ask ourselves, and this is me talking to executive leaders, what is it that our organizations can do in the workplace to reflect the world we want to see outside of the workplace? Most of you, talking to you executive leaders, cannot stop police brutality, right? That's a whole different argument and battle and fight. But you can make your policies, practices, and procedures more equitable. You can make sure that in your cost reduction efforts that they're driven by actual business case and not monkey see, monkey do. That they don't disproportionately impact black people and cut their legs from under them or remove their ability to generate wealth for their families in an inequitable way. You have that power right here. You don't have to work with somebody else to sign an amicus brief. You can just do better. The business case for diversity is clear. We're not talking about that in 2023. You can do better. I'm going to challenge you. Don't even send a note. Don't write any social media posts. Don't even do anything for Black History Month. Don't do it. Instead of thinking about Black history, you focus on Black future and Black present. The Black future and present of your Black employees. Do that. I promise you, your Black employees will appreciate it. And frankly, any of your employees who should really be working there will appreciate it. Because if you support the most marginalized group in any population, everyone else is supported. Okay? This has been Zach. I love you. I appreciate you. Make sure you click the links in the show notes. Support the family Tyre Nichols. Support and learn more about Tracy. And check out what Pfizer has going on. Till next time. Peace.
Living Corporate is a podcast by Living Corporate LLC. Our logo was designed by David Dawkins. Our theme music was produced by Ken Brown. Additional music production by Antoine Franklin for Musical Elevation. Post-production is handled by Jeremy Jackson. Got a topic suggestion? Email us at livingcorporatepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us online on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and living-corporate.com. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned.